Good evening, everyone. Meteorologist Jim Dickey here in the Storm Warn 7 Hurricane Center. Wanted to bring you a quick tropical update. I know there's a lot of interest in Maria and Jose, so let's get right to it. In fact, we just got the 5 p.m. advisories in, and Maria is now a hurricane off to the east of the Lesser Antilles. So there's your 3 storms, Jose, Maria, and Lee. Lee was actually downgraded to a tropical depression. Is no longer an issue. It's going to continue to move off to the north and northwest. In all likelihood, will fizzle out as we go to the next couple days. Again, Maria has strengthened to a hurricane, and then Jose, still a powerful storm, just off the east coast. There's your 5 p.m. advisory. Winds 90 miles per hour, moving to the due north at 9 miles per hour. And it's moving over what we call the Gulf Stream, which is a warm current of water that sits off the east coast of the United States. You can sort of make it out in the color table with our sea surface temperatures. It's that sort of stream that goes up right along the coast of the Carolinas and then out into the middle of the ocean. So that's going to be fuel for Jose to stay strong. But as it continues to head to the north, look what it's going to run into. I have a few temperatures plotted there off of the coast of the Delmarva. 71 degrees there, 60s for your water temperatures off the coast of New England. That's called the Labrador current. While those Gulf waters go north and then out into the open ocean to the north and east, there's a cold current that comes down the east coast from New England down into the northern beaches of North Carolina, Virginia, and the Delmarva Peninsula, again called the Labrador current. That's some cooler water, and that's what Jose is eventually going to run into. So don't be surprised if Jose does continue to strengthen here as we go through the next day or two, but eventually as it gets north of Cape Hatteras, it will start to weaken. All the same, going to come very, very close to Cape Cod, to Long Island, at the very least likely bringing some wind-driven rainfall there, impacts like a nor'easter. But then look at the tail end of this. By the time we get to Friday, the NHC now turning that back to the south. That's because there's going to be an area of high pressure setting up over the northeast, a blocking high, and that will be a factor for Maria in the long term as well. But regardless, still sort of a very interesting long-range forecast for Jose, and likely Wednesday, late Tuesday through Wednesday into Thursday, some wind-driven rainfall there for New England. Switch gears, talk about Maria. This is a loop of the infrared satellite imagery. What you're looking at is thunderstorm activity, more or less, and you're looking at the temperatures of cloud tops. So when you see those whites and that pink shade showing up right in the middle, there's some heavy thunderstorms setting up over the center of Maria, a sign of an intensifying hurricane. And yeah, it is now officially a hurricane as of that 5 p.m. advisory. Winds 75 miles per hour, moving to the west-northwest at 15. So already starting to see that more northerly component to Maria's motion. And there is your cone of concern, moving over many of the same areas impacted by Irma, exactly what we don't want to see. But again, it keeps on that northwesterly path. The cone of concern, as we get to Friday, does include all of Hispaniola, but the northern and eastern end goes well out into the central Atlantic, again, showing that general expected turn to the north and west. I know many of us here in southwest Florida, after just dealing with Irma, very worried about this storm. And what I want to show you is that, in general, models tending to keep this well away from southwest Florida. In fact, this is what, as far as I can tell, is the most reasonable window of movement for Maria as we go into the later part of the week and the upcoming weekend. Unlike Irma, where we had a very strong area of high pressure in the Atlantic that helped to steer that storm, Irma, to the due west, across, north of Hispaniola, across Cuba, and then eventually towards us, the area of high pressure that's usually there this time of year, the Atlantic Ridge, is weaker now. It's further to the east. That's going to give Maria that path to cut to the north. And just about every model you look at is sort of showing this. And there's very little in the way of evidence in the models, if any, that shows any type of solution that brings this towards southwest Florida. These are the spaghetti plots. They're all lined up, showing that turn as we go on into the weekend. Here we are by Sunday evening. Only one model, and that's an outlier at this point in time, shows this coming anywhere close to Florida. And then I know we showed this plenty throughout our coverage of Irma, the 2 global models, the GFS and the European. Here's the 2 latest runs of that model. First things first, yeah, watching this for Puerto Rico, in all likelihood, could have a direct landfall in Puerto Rico of perhaps a major hurricane as we get into the middle of the week. So that's the first thing we're going to be watching for. Impacts on the U.S., British Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, and Hispaniola. But from there, both models still holding on to the idea that this turns to the north. Watch as we go through the weekend. This keeps this a good 500 miles, both models, keeping this a good 500 miles off to the east of southwest Florida. And as we were reporting over the models, going back about a week before Irma's impacts, they were showing a storm coming much closer to southwest Florida. So I don't want you to think, oh, well, this could all shift. Yeah, you know, it's not a 0% chance. But at this time, the model's suggesting that this stays well off to our east. So not a storm you need to be worrying yourself about all that much yet, something to pay attention to. And we definitely can't rule out impacts to the United States in general, the east coast of Florida, and certainly up the east coast as we go to the later part of the week. But at this point in time, not looking all that likely that this would bring direct impacts to southwest Florida. So to sort of wrap this up, Jose, a threat to New England. As we go into the middle of the week, we're going to watch as that moves its way northward, and a very complicated forecast for that in the longer range. The first impacts from Maria will be in the Leeward Islands, and then Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, the U.S. and British Virgin Islands, and perhaps even Hispaniola. From there, models pretty confident that they're turning this to the north with that weak ridge off to the east that allows this to go north, perhaps even keeping this out to sea. But again, we'll be keeping a close eye on Maria. Be sure you're keeping a close eye on that forecast here as we go through next week. But at this point in time, not a storm to really worry yourself with just yet in southwest Florida. I'll have an update coming up, ABC 7 News at 6:30 and 11. Until then, meteorologist Jim Dickey. Have a good evening.